Hey everybody, welcome to Co-Pilots. I am Sean Conroy.
And I'm Andy Secunda.
On this podcast, we talk about TV pilots, the first episodes of television shows. Sometimes pilots become long-running series. Others don't make it past that first episode.
We're going to talk about all of them. The great pilots, the bad pilots, the weird pilots, the forgotten pilots. We are TV writers, but it should be noted that we are the dumbest TV writers you know, so all of these are just our dumb opinions.
So dumb.
Alison Becker, thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to roll right into this.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Alison, would you say your claim to fame is Parks and Rec?
That's the most known thing I've done, I think.
Right. Shauna, how do you say it?
Shauna Mulway-Tweed.
Shauna Mulway?
Nope, Mulway.
This is going to be the whole
tweet.
episode. Is just trying to figure out the name of her
You
character
already
in
lost.
Parks and
So
These are the kind of things we're going to be cutting out.
I'm sorry. I was
she's
lost
also
in thinking about that. Was it Mulway or Mulray?
No, I'm not. We're not going back there.
Yeah. Sean, we're actually cutting some of that out. Sean and I had a discussion the other day, and we're actually cutting out what I'm saying,
I'm not saying anything else.
Because he is a good improviser, will keep building on stuff, and I'm like, no, Sean, we're actually cutting that out.
Andy does that in the middle of the show. Like, he's just like, we're going to cut that. And I'm like, yes, let's cut it. I'm the cut guy. You know, like that kind of stuff. And he's
Andy
like,
also does that in real life.
Cutting.
Like, sometimes I'll just be having conversations with him, and he's like, we're going to cut that. I'm like, no, this is life.
No, that didn't happen. Did that really happen? There's no way you're going back? Alison is also an incredibly successful writer, both for TV and for film. And she is, furthermore, the person who recommended, in the first place, insisted, she beat Sean to it, even though Sean was also a fan, recommended Patriot, the topic of today's show. I would say I almost owe as big a debt of gratitude to Alison for recommending that show as I do to Sean for recommending The Wire. It's
bullshit.
Just, what? You don't stack them equally, huh? You don't stack them even in the same category.
Give me a fucking break.
Sorry, Sean.
I just love that your debts of gratitude are not for like life-saving things, just like for recommending TV shows.
No, I recommend. I owe the debts of gratitude for the things that make me happy, not anything from life. Anyway, and she insisted, I think much like Sean insisted for The Wire, and it's just immediately went to my top 5. It's just
it's a show that most people have never even heard of.
Well, that's the other crazy thing, is that both of you know it, and now I know it, obviously, and occasionally you run into people who, of course, are just like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing. And most people don't even know it. It's sardonic, it's heartfelt, it's badass, it's well crafted, it's funny. It's got it all.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's cinematically, crafted. It's just a wonderful show. So
my theory is they shouldn't have named it Patriot.
I think that's definitely a huge aspect, and the advertising for it was just completely off base,
non-existent. Yeah,
and I say that as someone who saw
like
the advertising before it was recommended to me, and I was like, that doesn't look interesting. That sardonic spy show doesn't look interesting to me.
I like how, first of all, the tech bros have fixed television by inventing all the streaming services. It's really working out great for everything, you know? And also, I love asking people if they've ever seen Patriot, and everybody goes, Mel Gibson's an anti-Semite, you know?
Yeah. I actually watched it in preparation for this. I watched an interview with Steve Conrad, who wrote it and created it. And the woman who called him a genius at the beginning of the interview kept referring to it as The Patriot. Every time, 7 times. And I kept going,
But it was originally called The Patriot.
Oh, was it?
It was. And then after they shot the pilot, they changed it to Patriot. But it is not the Mel
Let's
Gibson
change
movie.
it a tiny bit. That'll clear everything up.
I assume that was a legal or a confusion issue. I mean, that they were like, well, we can't do that.
What's weird is Mel Gibson's movie was originally called Patriot, and then they renamed it The Patriot.
I mean,
we're cutting that.
We're cutting that.
That joke, the Mel Gibson joke. Yeah, we don't want to stir up the Mel Gibson supporters. Whatever the case, I'll ask this first. Alison, how did you come, because it was such an unusual find, how did you come to Patriot?
Max, who I was dating at the time, recommended it to me, and he stumbled across it accidentally too. Somebody left a TV on, and when you finish a series, it just automatically randomly picks one for you. It picked that, and he was like, "What is this show? It looks amazing." And then he got on me about watching it, and I was like, same thing. I was like, "This doesn't look like something I'd be interested in. It's a bunch of dudes. There's not a lot of women in it," and I was just like, "This, it's not my style." But he also just forced me to watch it, and I was like, holy shit, beautiful, perfect. It's a perfect television show.
It's perfect.
And I told you that I stalked Stephen Conrad, right?
Yes. So we can, go ahead.
Stephen Conrad, the creator, it's just, he just made such a perfect show. And I reached out to him on Twitter, and I was like, hey, I love Patriot. And he was like, oh, that's so awesome. Do you want to get a cup of coffee? And I was like, yes. So I went to his office and met him, and we just chatted about TV and film. And he was just so accessible. And I know what you're thinking, Andy. You're going to be like, he thought it was a date. He did not think it was a date. He had a girlfriend, and he talked about his girlfriend, and I had a boyfriend. I did not want to date him.
Yeah, nobody goes on dates with other people when the other person's involved.
I don't.
You don't, but
it was very professional, and I was just so shocked at how down to earth and accessible he was, because no one watches the show.
I know. Now I think it is slowly risen in cult standing. So now I think that there is a little bit more of a following.
I reached out to him on Twitter and never heard back. So.
Well, Twitter. I don't know if you heard what happened to Twitter.
That's true.
So
I did get some stuff about Tommy Chong's gummies, so I'm excited about that.
But Sean, you're in a very complicated polyamorous relationship, and that's the reason.
You have no idea. There's diagrams, there's charts, there's all kinds of things.
The lines are blurred.
Yeah. He didn't want to get involved with that. Sean, how did you come to Patriot?
I honestly don't remember, but I think I just read some review of it somewhere from somebody I trusted. I mean, I don't know if it was Alan Sepinwall, who I always read, and I'm like, if he likes the show, I'm going to like the show. But it was somebody that I read a thing of, and I was like, oh, let me try this. And like you guys, I was immediately sucked in, and I think I probably watched the whole first season in maybe 2 days.
It's also a show that I have rewatched many times.
I've definitely rewatched it at least once. I don't know that I've rewatched it many times because that seems crazy.
Insane?
But, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, but I get it. There's so much to it. And even when I was just watching this episode, I kept being like, I forgot about that. It's moment after moment that's so great, That's what
I mean. The second and third viewing, you're like, oh, I didn't even notice that connected to this, because it's so well crafted.
I just want to point out, because, Sean, you're slamming the tech bros. It feels like the algorithm also pointed you toward this thing. So I feel like the algorithm is actually working pretty well, guys.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it pointed me towards the new Lord of the Rings as well, which is amazing if you haven't seen it. I love it. It's so good.
Okay, it's not 100%. All right, let's talk a little bit about Stephen Conrad, or Steve Conrad, as his friends like Alison call him.
Super tight. You could probably get him on the show, guys.
Maybe that'll happen.
You talking about Coffee Steve Conrad?
Yeah.
He wrote it's a little bit unclear to me. I think that he went in with Gil Bellows, who is both in the show and wrote the story with him. He was an incredibly successful screenwriter. He sold his first screenplay at 19. I think it was made when he was 24, which was Wrestling Ernest Hemingway. He's written The Weatherman. He wrote The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. He wrote The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. One of the things that's delightful about Conrad is he himself is just like, some of those movies, had good stuff in them. Some of them didn't. It's all about tone. You don't have control as a screenwriter, generally speaking. And he took this concept to Gil Bellows, to FX. They pitched it. One thing that's fascinating, because I'm always, as I'm sure you guys are, always fascinated with, like, how did they convince them to do this? And my thought, sight unseen, is I bet you this happened in that one, we might call it the AMC moment of Amazon. I'm sure there are other examples, but AMC, as I've said before, put on Mad Men and Breaking Bad in a moment. They were like, we're trying to build up our reputation. We'll just throw stuff on. It's like, oh, you just threw on some of the greatest television shows ever made because you weren't holding the stranglehold on it that often happens in development. And by his own perspective, Conrad's, that is exactly what happened. It was this brief moment, not with FX, but with Amazon, where they were open to, hey, let's hear a different voice. Let's explore something. He was able to have so much, not just his script, but he was able to direct it and just have so much power over it. It's a crazy.
I feel like when you watch this, you basically see his whole brain over the course of the series. Like, I find that's what's most compelling about it, is it's like one, and that's what makes it great, is it feels like it's one person's vision of the story, vision of the world, vision of what's interesting and unusual and weird in our day-to-day world, like little obsessions of his. And so I think to your point, because it was such a weird moment and he sort of slipped one through without anybody paying attention, there was nobody to blur it during the course of making it.
The other aspect that I had skipped over was that he sold it to FX, and apparently they played songs and stuff in the pitch, because that, to Conrad's perspective, is the thing that communicates tone of the show better than anything, which I think is genius. But they sold it to FX. He wrote the script, and FX passed, and apparently passed on Perpetual Grace as follow-up too. And then Amazon picked it up just because it was a finished script, and I guess it communicated the idea better. And they, as we're talking about, were willing to roll the dice. They apparently characterized themselves as the filmmaker studio in that, one moment in time, and we're up for making ambitious television. And
I mean, just to be clear, ambitious television, new voice, still a white guy.
Well, yes.
I love his work, but just to be clear, they weren't doing anything crazy, groundbreaking, but they were in that they were letting one person have creative control over something. And I don't think I'll tell you a story. Well, first of all, two things. Stephen Conrad's brother is also in this world. He plays Dennis.
Right.
And Stephen Conrad he's ripped. Stephen Conrad refers to his brother as Conrad.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So, yeah, I guess everyone just calls him Conrad, the brother. But I don't think I'll be speaking out of turn when I say this, but I won't say the name of the actor that he said. But he was telling me, I was asking him about, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but I will just say there is a monologue at one point that in the series that the character Leslie does that I think is one of the best monologues, if not the best monologue from television. The way it's shot and the way it's done. It's absolutely incredible. And I was asking Steve, so what'd you say?
I concur. You didn't need me to concur, but I did.
I did. But I was asking Stephen Conrad about that, and he said that in some of his earlier projects, like some of the ones you mentioned, Andy, he had a bunch, when he didn't have as much creative control, where he was just the screenwriter and not directing, he had written similar speeches that were meant to be shot in one take. And he was very frustrated with a certain actor who could not learn it in one take, and it had to be cut up. And he was just like adamant. He's like, this has to be one take. This has to be one take. The whole point of this has to be one take. The actor has to know this dialogue so intimately. And everyone was like, yeah. And then he said he showed up on set, and this actor was just like, yeah, we're gonna have to cut this up. Like, I didn't memorize this.
I know who
and it just doesn't have the same power.
Well, this is who do you think it was?
I know who.
I'm not going to say.
He just wants to say. Okay, no problem. It kind of points out also, and Conrad speaks to this, not just from the brain that that created it, or the writer's room behind it, which is also an unorthodox process, the way he describes it, which is he has this think tank of younger people and friends and all these people with like sensibilities, and they all just sort of think about genre and think about how to put twists on it, and it's just this amazing creative lab that he's created. But in addition to that, I think you can feel that these actors, many of them who are these journeyman actors that have been in endless things, Terry O'Quinn, who was Locke on Lost, and Kurtwood Smith, from RoboCop on down, and all these people, you can feel them, even if they're in the smallest part, which often in Patriot will become a much larger explored part later, you can feel them as actors. Just, this is a perfect steak of a meal that he is serving them, and they are going to do their best job. They are going to approach it with the craft that he is approaching it with on the writing side. And it's not universal, even though, we've all worked, let's say, near the top of the industry.
Top adjacent.
It's not constant that everyone approaches their job like, all right, I'm going to do the best job I can today. And everyone in the show, from the top of the call sheet to the bottom of the call sheet, is delivering 100%.
They nailed it.
Yeah.
Do you think that has to do with possibly him sort of having people in mind when he wrote stuff?
I think so. I mean, like, with the example of his brother, yes. I think he had to, but I don't know. I don't think that's true with every single part, obviously.
And with his brother, I think it's a perfect example of you can intuitively sense, oh, I don't know who this person is, and they're nailing it, which means he either got super lucky in the casting process, or he knows this person. And of course, he knows this person better than anybody because it's his brother. And it's just like, what a delight of a character.
So funny. So perfect.
So perfect.
And he just gets better as the show goes on. That character just gets better. Is that a spoiler? He gets better.
See now, what would you say, Allison? What would you say if someone said,
I wouldn't
watch
know
that
but
character? There you go.
Listen,
I can't wait for this character to get better. I wonder if this is the better he gets.
No,
is this
still
the
in
better?
the back of my mind. He gets better.
That didn't seem better. Where's the better?
Allison, I watched the show. This character stayed the same.
He's great, but he's not better. It's hard to get better than great, but I'm waiting for it.
So anyway, Sean, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So the very first thing we see is just a definition of what a knock is, which is a non-official cover for a CIA agent who goes into foreign countries to sort of do CIA things. So it's spy shit.
A very run-of-the-mill job. A very run-of-the-mill job that they have to do in tandem with being a spy. They have to complete this real job so everyone around them thinks that they are a plumber or whatever.
With less governmental protection or accessibility than one would have if one was, at a U.S. embassy somewhere or one of the places that the CIA is often stationed. So I'm always a fan of the written explanation at the beginning of the movie, like a Star Wars kind of thing or a Fargo or whatever, where they're like, this is information you need to know that we don't want to give in exposition. So
I always get stressed. I got to be honest. I get stressed when they show text on screen because I'm like, I want to read it all. And I read it too fast. And then I didn't get any of it. So then I go back to read it slowly a second time, but I only make it halfway through because I wasted the time reading the whole thing. It's only me?
Ultimate good student. What if the second page after the first page of information was a quiz?
Oh, I would nail it. But it's a peek into this very specific subset of government agents.
And I'm sure it's been covered in media before in various forums, but it's such a gimme. It's such a great comedic thing.
Yes, because we have to watch this person do two jobs.
Also, the most like to our minds, mundane job that you have to nail or the country is at stake in their minds. And you have to nail this mundaneness, and we can follow him interacting with those people and also put cool actions, intense spy shit in. It's such a brilliant concept.
It really is. And I wonder how he stumbled on it or discovered it himself, because you're absolutely right. The main character is dealing with these absolutely life or death situations. Meanwhile, his boss is like yelling at him because he took the wrong parking spot, and he has to give them equal attention. Otherwise, it'll mess up the whole project.
So wonderful. This is again just what I inferred, because the story is by Gil Bellows and Steve Conrad, but he wrote everything after that. And Gil Bellows didn't write that much, even though he has written stuff. He's primarily a successful journeyman actor. My theory is Gil Bellows either with Steve Conrad came up with the idea or said, I read about this thing. If you ever want to do anything about this, and Conrad, being, it seems, the generous, creative person that he is, was just like, all right, I'll give you story by on this.
I had the same thought, not to jump on the Andy Secunda bandwagon, but I had the same thought that would be why Gil Bellows was involved. And there actually is an article you can find online in Mother Jones about this part of the CIA, that there are knocks out there. Apparently, at the time the article was written, there are about 110 around the world. So, it does really.
Andy, are you one of them? Are you fronting as a television writer because you're actually a spy?
I mean, we're going to have to cut this, because even just you raising it is going to throw question on the situation.
But here's the other thing about the thing being defined as a spy stuff at the beginning is it totally loads the first scene, because otherwise it's just a boring job interview. But because we know there's something else going on, it's incredibly tense in a way, It also does the thing, and this is why it's really brilliant writing, even though they're using the trope of the text, which I think is usually defensive. It frames everything immediately. Yeah. It frames the entire story without giving away other than sort of setting the tone, because of the text itself is very specific font, and it's a little too verbose. And it's just like everything that, like, the job, the engineering job will also be. It kind of feels like that. So both sides have this, but it also just like is immediately like, oh, that's what I'm going to be watching.
And both sides also have the theme of getting something from A to B, getting something from one place to another. The piping industry, all they're doing is following the movement of one thing to another place, and the whole mission on the spy side is getting this one bag from point A to point B.
Right.
And I love that they both line up that way.
You're saying it's a metaphor in a sense.
It's a metaphor in an only sense, yes.
Yeah.
Now who's the nerd? Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, we start with him running. He's just running. He's late for something. And then we see that he was late for his job interview, and he's in this room with a bunch of guys who are interviewing him about... And ultimately what it is, but it's just crazy jargon, which I'm always a fan of. Like, it just is nonsense words as far as most people would be concerned. And these guys are so super serious about it, and he's clearly fucking it up and has no idea what he's supposed to be saying.
Which, just to address right off the top, because it is... Absolutely, Alison is right. It was written by a white guy of a certain age. I do feel like immediately right off the bat, this is a kind of, I don't even know if it's a kind of white guy, or this is just all of the entire patriarchy as a whole. But it's just like, it's so great. I think that the job itself is real. But I believe because I kept feeling like, is this jargon real or not? I believe the jargon is, for the most part, fake.
I think the jargon is, for the most part, fake, but it is so brilliantly done.
Well, it's just becomes like,
how many
even
fillet
more...
balls would you put on the cracked or uncracked quad? And they're saying it so effortlessly. You're just like, wait, you're just so drawn into it.
Again, going back to the performances and how it's delivered, it becomes poetry, even though it's the most dry technical information, but the seriousness And you're in our world now, bro. So this is how we're going to, like, that whole tone of, all right, you were off base on that. And I think we're all in agreement that he was, and just that there's a little bit of a sort of racist swipe at the Asian character. There's a little bit of sexism in these meetings. It's all white dudes. To me, even though it's a heavily male-weighed show, which was your first, not having seen it, perspective on the show, Alison, I think it really is like, it's a satire of this kind of personality in a very specific way.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And that's why I was like, oh, okay, I'm in.
Just to add one more thing, as far as it being a pilot, that's a big scene with lots and lots of characters in it. And I love that they don't care about going, this guy's great, and this guy's great, and this guy's great. Like, they're just a bunch of dudes in that scene, and it's clearly focused on the main character. And we sort of get to know all these guys later on as the show goes on instead of right away. And they are all
I was surprised
characters.
At how many of those characters are established in that scene in little snippets of dialogue that, of course, at the time it sort of washes over you, and later
right.
you realize
also, that pilot was shot like 2 years before the show, or at
I
least
didn't
a year and a
realize
half.
there
It
was
was
that
shot.
much
It
of
was
a gap.
It was some, or at least a year and a half. It was just the timing was all wild. So the fact that they were even still available and like it's just
That actually makes sense, because one of the other things Conrad was talking about was that, and I remember this, I don't know if you guys remember when they were telecasting pilots, and then people were they would, based on metrics, they were getting, Amazon was getting information about them.
Weren't people voting on them at that time? Wasn't that a thing
yes.
with Amazon?
And so that in and of itself is kind of, I mean, I'm not necessarily against it, because then you can kind of at least get feedback directly from the audience. The thing that Conrad specified, though, which is of course perfect, and you kind of got to say understandable, is it didn't matter how many people liked the show in the metrics. What mattered is how many people that bought a lot of stuff on Amazon liked the show.
Oh my god!
So it was like narrowed down to
bummer.
this even.
There's got to be a way we can wring more money out of the world, Gary. We're gonna do it.
But I am sort of surprised that it must have done well enough in those metrics, unless they were just like, this is a good show, we have to go with it.
I think that it went to series, or that it went to season 2.
That it went to series, because that makes sense that there was that much of a gap, that they had the pilot and then they did all this testing and there was a pause and all this stuff. I just wonder what that decision process was.
In my mind, I can't remember if somebody told me this or it's just what I'm imagining.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was just an exec who was like, I love this show. I want it to come back. Because it just didn't have the following. It didn't have, and still doesn't have the following.
For all
to make money.
If the voting was influenced by how much people buy on Amazon, do you think Steve Conrad was going on his computer every day and just buying shit because he voted for his own show?
He has warehouses full of just slippers.
I don't know what I'm going to do with all this.
Okay, so he comes out of the interview. He's pretty sure he fucked it up pretty badly, because he did fuck it up pretty badly. And then he hears the people inside talking about him and talking about how this other guy did better than him. And he realizes he's in trouble and he's not going to get this job that he needs to save the world. So he's walking out of the building. I mean, that's the other thing. The setting of this is so great. The industrial, like, weird plant in the middle of nowhere. Not that Milwaukee is nowhere. Yeah, exactly. But it's just so it's like a dingy, sort of grimy, has definitely seen better days kind of area.
It has like a purgatory like feeling, which is appropriate for his mental state. But there is, as with the language, there is this beauty to the mundaneness and how it's shot. It's just so incredible.
So as he's walking out, he runs into the guy who is his rival for the job, and they're walking together. And I mean, it's just such a great way to end the cold open, because he realizes this guy is his rival and he needs to do something about it, so he pushes him in front of a truck.
So this is Marcus Toji playing the character Stephen Chichu, and
I accosted him once at an audition. I saw him at an audition once and made him take a picture with me.
oh yeah, that's definitely one you gotta get the.
I watched several episodes of West Wing over the pandemic not that long ago, and he was like a high school student in that. And it was one of those things where I was like, holy shit, there he is. You know,
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment, which is, by the way, under 4 minutes into the show. And all of us being professional writers, and something we've talked about before, the amount of pressure on a show for you to establish the characters' motivations, establish their likability, establish their competence.
And keep it entertaining.
Keep it entertaining. In the first few minutes of this show, we see this character be late, blow an interview, and push a very apparently sweet and innocent person who is more competent than him in front of a truck. And everything that Sean said about him saving the world, we find that out as the show is doled out, but we don't know any of that at this point. We just know this guy. And it's also one of the things that's impressive about this show is the violence in it is not like fun spy violence. You really feel the thud when the truck hits him.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is awful. But of course, it's brilliant. It's just like, you're starting your show there with your main character? How are you going to take yourself out of this?
And they do it. They do it. Also, the Steven character really, I think, opens the door to the most absurdist of all the storylines, I think. The one that's I think least grounded in reality. And it's still just perfectly balanced and perfecly done.
You're saying after the pilot? Or
yeah, would you agree that again, I don't want to give away anything, but would you agree that the Steven thread throughout the series, I think, is the least grounded in reality?
Well, I think what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, is the idea that this guy is a threat to him because his memory is slowly coming back, and he's there. This is all in the pilot. He's there to correct his work. I forget what even the work is.
Right, but even the point that somebody would bring in the part that when I'm saying it's not grounded, I mean the fact that somebody would bring in an interviewee who has a severe brain injury to correct the work of the actual employee. That is not grounded in reality. But I'm not saying that as a knock. I'm saying that, not pun intended. I'm saying that as adds to the tone of the show. The tone of this show is dark and is slightly absurdist. And that storyline really makes that absurdity clear in a really cool way.
There is an element that I kind of, and maybe this is just, as we call in the geek world, headcanon, that I am explaining, but there's part of it that a lot of the things like that are like, oh, well, he would be fired or he would be gone. Some of that comes from that Leslie Claret, played by Kurtwood Smith, just so brilliant in this.
Some of the best acting I've ever seen.
I absolutely agree. And he's going to his toolbox. Like, Kurtwood Smith has been playing this on that 70s show. He's been playing variations of the ultimate intimidating authority dad figure in various different things. So he has that. And this is this refined version. And one of the refinements is Kurtwood Smith is justifiable in everything that he's doing. Lakeman is screwing up every step of the way. The point I was trying to get to is it feels like some of this is government nepotism. Like there are hands behind the scenes that are making sure that he stays in place. Obviously, his sort of resume was rigged and his recommendations were rigged. But I feel like my headcanon is there's a lot of stuff going on that we're not seeing that is keeping him in that place. Which may not be true, but so that to me leavens some of the absurdity of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so they're bringing to chew back in. It's like, all right, well, we're stuck with this guy, so we can't fire him. Let's just bring the other guy back in, was my reasoning.
But also, it's just one of those moments, one of those, like, you're watching something and you just go, holy shit. Like, it's just so over the top in that moment when he pushes him in front of the truck. Like, I never felt like I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen here. And it was such a big move that I also was like, okay, I'm in 100% right now. You know, I don't have to wait till Andy's episode 4.
How many people? I have a theory that that's absolutely true. I have a theory that a lot of great shows, they don't click in until episode 4, which Sean has been fighting me on. But this show, absolutely immediately, I was like, oh my God, this may be my favorite show. How many people do you think watched it and were like,
4.
What? Screw this. 4? That seems like reasonable. Sean, what's your guess? She's at 4 people.
I always go over, so I'm going to say 5. But
5?
I actually feel like if you're somebody who found this show and you got to that moment, there's no way you could just walk away at that
Agreed.
moment, you know?
You mean if the robot overlords decided you should watch this show, then
yeah.
by that point,
there's always
probably...
hands behind the scenes. That's my headcanon, is that the people who watched it, there was hands behind the scenes pulling strings. No, I just feel like it's such a perfect cold open because, like you said, it establishes everything about the main character and the tone of the show and everything. And then it also, story-wise, makes you go, holy shit, this guy's in huge trouble. What's going to happen next? And you want to see, you know? And then we get a bunch of exposition about what's going on, which, again, is hard to do, but it's done in kind of a cool way because it's the sound of a newscast over slow motion footage of what the newscast is describing as a big problem. We find out that
the guy that they wanted to win
some
the election
nuclear shit going on in Iran, which I believe is still the case, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
There's all kinds of let's let him have this, let's not let him have this, whatever the case. There's an election coming up in Iran, and this is what they're trying to get involved in.
The good guy was killed in the crash.
Or the guy, yes.
The guy that they wanted to win the election.
Yes.
Is killed in the crash.
Who's going to keep Iran from having nuclear weapons.
Right.
And the bad guy is going to so they need to stop that by doing certain CIA things, which is what they get into later. And this is where we see Terry O'Quinn as Tom Tavener calling and getting his son to come over. He's like, cancel your plans and get over here. And we start to, then he has his conference with a woman. See, again, I love the spy shit. Like, they're not in an office anywhere. They're just on a weird balcony, backlit like Andy is right now, and having a conversation.
Why I did it. I set the backlighting for
it was an homage.
Guys. That's right.
But again, we find out that the guy that we've already seen is the son of this other guy, and that he's a spy and he works for the CIA, and this is his superior, and it's a little weird. I mean, it's just such a great, and it never felt, there's so much information there, and it never felt clunky to me, which is where you get in trouble with exposition.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know, I respect it so much. I'm also so jealous of the writing because there is so much exposition, but you're never, and even for me, like, it's the first time I watched it, there was so much going on that I was like, if you wanted me to write a book report on this show, what happened, I don't know if I could do it after the first time I watched it, because there's so much going on, but I couldn't stop watching it. It was just done in such an artful way.
Well, that's the other thing, is that they have it was a term that Conrad and his people have, right, that they use something that's sort of just general plot exposition you don't have to follow, that's from Team America, and then they combine it with Treadwell from Bourne Identity, and it's basically just like, this is just stuff, we're gonna get it all right, but you don't need to process it.
Exactly.
And this is exactly like that. The only thing that is the main information that you get from that Terry O'Quinn scene, also just breathtaking in the series,
yes,
is that he's basically admitting that his son is a little bit off the rails. He's saying he's good, he's good at the job, but he's been singing these songs that are, basically revealing some of his mission, which obviously is not good for a spy. And then he sort of has the side, like, dad thing of, like, the songs are actually pretty good. They're very,
maybe
whatever.
I'm biased. I'm his dad.
Yeah, I'm his dad. And what's wonderful is, like, I kind of, like, it's hard to get a sense of him, and they take their time in this pilot. So later you see him singing with his son, and there's this bond between them. You're kind of like, oh, that kind of origin story reverse explains why he would, be like, the songs are kind of good. My question to you guys right off the top, and this might be tough without spoilers, but do you feel like he is putting John in this mission because you think he thinks he's the best, he'll be the best for it, that he can control him, or that he's trying to help him? Like, he wants to be connected to his son, and he thinks that he just is better if he's in the field.
I think it's all of them.
Right. Which
and,
is the
it really brings up, they also get into this delicate dance, which they do in the first episode. Not even delicate, just outright dance of the relationship between the two brothers and how, John is really the alpha. And Ed is just so in awe of his brother. And the scene in the pilot where Terry O'Quinn asks Michael Chernus about the camcorder incident from when they were little kids is such a funny and cool and interesting way for Terry O'Quinn to ask his son. Because basically he's asking that question because he wants to know if this guy will put his life on the line for his brother. That's what he wants to know. He's like, will you... He can't outright ask him that. Will you put your life on the line for your brother? Will you protect your brother at all costs? Instead, he says, did you break my camcorder in the 80s? And he's like, no, I didn't. Meemaw did it. And that
he's
is
so committed to the lie. Yeah.
He's so committed to the lie. And what a great way to get that information out. And that is something, like, as a writer that I love. It's like, we need to get this information to the audience. We could do it in a really boring way, or we could do it in a really fun, roundabout way that's so interesting to watch.
What's an oblique angle to come in at?
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, and I think it also is like, it's a great way to, the opening credits, which we skipped over, is this like Super 8-ish kind of old footage of them as kids kind of playing and shooting and doing the stuff that's like with this eerie folk music. That's, again, a perfect tone setter for, it's like, what kind of spy show is this? Exactly. And it ties back with the camcorder of them playing as kids, busting the camcorder, and he's watching it. Like, why am I watching this? I was wondering also if there's some level, and I think that what you're saying is probably more dead on, but I wonder if there was some level in that scene of Terry O'Quinn testing, are you still CIA material that you're just going to lie straight down the line and not blink? As opposed to it's more about protecting.
Yeah,
John.
protecting his brother. But maybe it was because otherwise he didn't get the outcome he wanted, right?
Right.
So this is also where we find out that the son is in Amsterdam, and then we switch over there, and he is singing folk songs. And to your point, Andy, I think it is about, sure, this guy is great at being a spy, but the father also knows that he's kind of mentally unraveling because of what he's been through, which we find out a lot more about later, including murdering an innocent person, and that's really undone him. And so I think it is about like
accidentally murdering.
Yes, it was. He got bad information, and he sings a song about why are there male maids in Egypt or whatever it is and nowhere else. But this is an opportunity for him to reclaim his sanity and his sense of himself because he feels so badly about having done that. So we get to see him just getting stoned in Amsterdam and riding his bike and singing songs, and
which is again to talk about Michael Dorman for a second. Just such a difficult part and so compelling. Yes. And that scene you're describing is like an example of that, of like, there's this softness and vulnerability, and like when you see his joy, it makes you so happy. 90% of the show is him with this blank-faced weight on him.
But like when he's like when he sees his brother, when he's high and he looks up in Amsterdam and he sees his brother, there's this smile, you just like feel it all over your whole body.
Yeah. He's also he's from New Zealand, which I had no idea, because the other thing that Sean and I know him from is For All Mankind as Gordo. There's another, just sort of hardcore American. He's also great in. And a different part.
Very different, yeah.
Although some of the same vulnerability. Have you seen For All Mankind yet, Allison?
Have not.
Oh, right up your alley. You would love it.
All right. It's got man in the title, so it must be.
This is also, to me, this was also the first moment. I guess there was a couple of them in this sequence, but it's the first moment where I'm watching it and I'm becoming aware of how really out of the way they've gone with cinematic shots. Like, there's the shot of him sitting on the bench in the park. It's an overhead shot, and there's all these different paths leading in different directions, and the cop is coming. It's just such a fucking cool thing. And when he's stoned and looking at the birds, I don't know. It was just, that whole sequence was so impressive to me.
And to your point about like when you're listening to the newscast, but you're watching the slow motion helicopter blade sort of spin across, and in shots like you're describing, and there's tons of shots in this that are either long oneers, just one shot, which is what the end of the show is, or you're watching one person in focus and then there's another person out of focus that's talking. And all of this really reads very cinematic and very indie film. Like not even like big Hollywood film. Like very odd visual choices.
Yeah, some of it is like that shot that you're describing, Sean, looking down. It feels very Wes Anderson, where it's just like a direct shot. And but you're right, it feels like an indie film.
So then we see Edward canceling his plans with a little kid who is ostensibly his, I don't know what they called it, but his friend and companion
Beltway buddy.
Or something. Yeah. Beltway buddy. Right. So now we're establishing a bunch of characters. We see Edward. We see Tom go by the school to see John Lakeman's wife, who he hasn't seen in a long time, and sort of say he's going to be back, but then he's going to leave again. So just be chill, and see in that character the difficulty of being involved with somebody who does the stuff that this main character does and how hard that is.
And that's played by Kathleen Monroe as Alice's wife. And one of the things that Conrad talked about that is, I think, really essential for the show is that they sort of, in trying to put twists on some of the tropes, the classic one being that the spy is the big womanizer, they wanted to have he be thoroughly committed and in love with his wife. And it's so heartbreaking because, of course, if you're in that position and you're a spy and you're constantly overseas in danger and you can't get in touch and you can't never relax even, when you're home, it's like when they're together, it's so beautiful and you feel it's such pain for John.
I know, it is.
That he's separated from her.
He's just constantly pining for her, and at one point he's covered in blood and just calls his wife and is like, "Did you set the alarm?" It's so great.
Right. And even that character, her character, the easy way to go, I think, would have been that the spouse would have been like, this is bullshit, how can he's whatever, and da-da-da-da. And it's this slow burn to, she trusts the father, she knows he has to do whatever he has to do, and it's just this slow burn to any reaction from her that kind of makes you feel just bad for everyone. You immediately have your sympathy for everyone in the situation.
So then we see the so we've already talked about this a little bit. But the father assigns Edward to go to Amsterdam and bring his brother back because they need him. And that's when we see that beautiful moment of him looking up and seeing his brother and just smiling, and you feel the love between them. And then we come to one of the things that, again, is such a holy shit moment, but it's so awful, but also so funny to me, which is the grandmother reading Mary Poppins to the Beltway buddy and saying she flew with an umbrella, and then that scene of him marching across the dining room or whatever with the umbrella over his shoulder.
My heart was
and
just
then
like,
going up the stairs and jumping off the building is incredible.
So upsetting. And they don't shy away. The kid breaks his ankles and his feet, and he's in a wheelchair the rest of the episode. It's just like, that's a child. One of the main characters, because of his fuck up, a kid broke his ankles. That's like in episode 1.
It's so dark. But you're right. It's like, how can we make all of this even sadder?
And yet I found it hilarious at the same time, you know?
Because he doesn't die.
Which is like right in my wheelhouse, is incredibly dark and incredibly funny at the same time. And to what we were talking about before, coming at exposition from an oblique angle, we then see the child's mother has called Edward on the phone and is screaming at him about how he left the kid with the grandmother. And one of the things she says is, I can't believe you're a congressman when you would do something like that. I mean, she says it much less directly than I did, but that's where we kind of find out what this guy's job is and why he's involved in all this, which, again, to me, I was
what
like,
a great way to get that exposition
cool.
out.
Yeah.
In a quiet way.
And so John doesn't want to leave because he has a bull riding contest to compete in.
He's got to win that cash prize. That's how he's been keeping himself afloat.
And he has this plan. He's going to bicycle across Europe. He's going to bring Alice with him. It's this beautiful thing that really, even at this point in the series, we're just like, oh, I hope he can do that. We've already seen him push a guy into traffic. We're already rooting for him.
He wants to look at the Spanish birds. Yeah.
And so in that scene, which is also shot very indie, kind of almost a Sam Raimi shot of him on the bull and the brothers watching, it's so subtle, but he releases the bull and intentionally loses.
Because of course he could win. He's from Texas.
He's from Texas. All these other people are from, where are they at that point? Is that Amsterdam?
They're in Amsterdam, but they're like, there's a guy from the UK.
No, there was a British guy who went up before him. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever the case,
but that's
he's going to
his
win.
choice. It's his choice to say, I choose this life of chaos and danger.
Right.
Which I think he's addicted to. I don't know why at this point, but
but I also saw it as him going, I do want to go home and see my wife right now. Like
True.
It's like he wants to go back there. And he is from Texas, but it turns out Texas is a bit of a mixed bag, because you do learn how to ride bulls, but they also try to ban mifepristone for the entire country. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on.
Let's talk about Texas for 2 hours.
Sean likes to dig in on the deep political issues right in the middle of our TV pilot podcast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we live in the real world, even though we spend a lot of time in the imaginary world.
Not me. I'm going right back to Lord of the Rings after this. I really feel like it's tied to stuff about the father and obligation, and like he has so much weight on his shoulders the whole time, and the understanding of what he believes, what his father believes, of like, I'm doing this for the safety of the country and maybe the world, but I think it's mostly that is what his dad thinks. So it's this weird, which is of course his father is kind of using against him emotionally, consciously or unconsciously. And so I think that's all loaded into when he releases the bull, which is crazy. That's like, how much would you have to spell out if this was, more of a network pilot? Or
can you imagine network notes all over this? It would be it would have ruined it.
It would have been a totally different show. But frankly, even anywhere, frankly, their perspective would have been reasonable. It's just like, you're taking a big chance, and
is it possible for the main character not to have assassinated an innocent person by accident?
What if
No, it's not.
No.
What if instead he helps the person from being hit by a truck?
He starts to shoot him, then he helps him clean the room. And then, so then we're back in the States with the dad briefing John. And again, it's a huge exposition scene but it's really enjoyable to watch because they just go through like they're playing Frisbee, they're hanging out by the pool. They interrupted by speculating about Edward. Like I think that's where the father goes, that's his kid, right? Like he sort of
the Beltway buddy.
Right.
It's probably his son, right?
Right. But in the meantime, we get explanations of what he's got to do and why he has to go to Luxembourg, because Luxembourg is the only country in Europe that does business with Iran, all this stuff that's going to have a huge impact on the story later on. And then they sing together. That's sort of the end of that sequence, is what we talked about before, that the dad and him are singing together. And then we're back in the interview day, which happened, obviously, we're doing a time jump back to the interview day, and he has to give them a urine sample so that they can decide whether or not he's trustworthy.
But of course, he's been doing nothing but smoking weed in Amsterdam.
Of course.
Right.
And the other thing, just in terms of the structure, it's so, and I wonder if to a certain degree this is from Conrad's experience writing movies. It's so sure-handed, the leap time-wise, and that we're going to be on board and figuring it out and everything's fine. And it is so effective to have it slowly lay out information and always stay on the most interesting thing. But yeah, then he's in the bathroom, and that's where we...
But I also want to just mention that before we get to the bathroom, we get introduced just for a second to the character of Jack Birdbath, who was a cop who accidentally shot a child, I think, right? Wasn't that his problem?
Yeah.
And he so we only just see him. He doesn't have an interaction with him, but the woman in the office tells him, who's clearly taken with him. Yeah,
she's disgraced. He's disgraced.
He's disgraced.
Yeah. He's disgraced.
Yeah. So just wanting to say it, just wanting to be the first person that says it to Lakeman.
But again, it totally loads the next time we see Jack Birdbath, you know. So then we're in the bathroom, and that's the scene where he meets Dennis for the first time, and it's pretty
Dennis.
Outstanding.
And Dennis has to give his pee for America.
That's right.
And I thought that was really interesting because it's like he basically tells him the truth about everything. Like he's this super secret spy, and he basically goes, I'm a super secret spy with dirty urine, so I need to take yours to save the world, you know? But
he's also, it's the judgment that he's making on this guy, which he nails, obviously. He's like, this guy is going to be so excited to help with spy shit that he is only going to be on my side no matter what. And he's right.
Yes.
Right.
And it's a stance that is consistent with the Lakeman character, or the John character, because Lakeman is a cover, that he's always put in these situations, either by his own screw up or by someone else's screw up. And he's like, all right, I have to solve this situation in possibly the darkest way possible, or maybe it'll be an easy way or whatever, but I have to solve it. And so he does the thing that no other spy would do, which is, this is the deal. That's the only way I'm going to get out of this. Otherwise, this thing's over anyway. So I might as well take the chance. And then it works. But of course, there's always repercussions to every decision he makes like that.
And I want to say about screw-ups in general, there are so many tiny and comical screw-ups that are done by just random government officials who are just supposed to be like prepping John on things. And they cause such huge problems. Like they gave him the wrong address for the interview, so that's why he was late. They did terrible recon to figure out if he was going to fly private or commercial. And like these little things that just seem like tiny little mishaps are just ruining everything for John.
Which is mirrored by the fact that his, I forget what they call it, but his getaway team had bad information when he gave him bad information, and then also got arrested, which is what put him in foreign custody for a while. Like they're all
which also contributes
total,
which contributes to his trauma because he was tortured, and it's just like there's a lot of things that's the fucking genius of pushing this guy into traffic at the beginning, is that then the pilot, and it's just the beginning, is a revelation of all of these little details that make us go, well, he was tortured, he killed an innocent person, and it weighs on him in a way that it doesn't. Again, an interesting twist from usual action spy movies, that it's like, every death weighs on him, or every every time he hurts someone, it's like the worst thing ever for him. When he kills the male maid later, it's just like this thing that's staying in his brain, and he has to sing songs about it to try and get it out. And you're totally right, Alison. His contact that's setting him up for the flight overseas is so perfect to me. And it's such just like a small little character. Yeah. And it's like he's so obnoxious. And all the questions John asked of like, well, if it's not a private plane, then they're gonna check my bag, because he's transporting money at that point. They're gonna check my bag, and the guy's like, we already did the research. This is what it's like, this annoying thing. And who amongst us has not faced that situation where we even thought ahead 3 steps? We're like, well, this is the thing that could go wrong, and I'm going to ask you about this. And then that person is obnoxious about it, and they're wrong. It's just like so infuriating.
But then, to add another layer onto it, there's another contact who we don't see in person this episode, but who calls him to give him the information about where the Barros brother took the bag.
Right.
And he's trying to be like, John, listen to me. These guys are Brazilian. And he's like, I don't care. I don't need their backstory.
They
he's
know
like,
martial
Brazilians,
arts.
they know martial arts.
Right.
And like, it's so funny because now we have a contact. John is so used to these contacts being such dummies that he's like, right, buddy, I don't need that information. But he really does need that information this time. It's so great.
And then one other thing. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
The one other thing to tie it back to is just, because of the bad information, he's late to the initial meeting.
Yep. Because
he's late to the initial meeting, and the dialogue really spells this out, that they're like, I don't know which one. This guy's got a great resume, a great recommendation. Lakeman does. But the other guy really knows his stuff, and he was on time. And so that is the turning point.
Yes.
But he's got the bad information, which leads to him having to push him into a truck. If you're going in John's head of like, I have to accomplish this mission, and he doesn't like. So even from John's perspective, I didn't want to do this. I was put in this position.
I just want to go back to what you were saying, Andy, because that was what I took away from that scene in the bathroom, is like, he is just constantly confronted with incredibly difficult circumstances, but he has the license to do whatever he needs to do to solve those problems, including, not to, say this, but a license to kill. If he needs to kill somebody, he can just kill them. And if he needs to tell somebody the truth, he can do that. And so we're just going to see that over and over again. Like, how am I going to fix this thing that's right in front of me right now? And I was also thinking that in terms of metaphor, if this show, our podcast, is the mission, Andy is the John Lakeman and I'm the government official, because Andy is always like, what if this happens? What if we do this? And I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So,
and as in the show, either person can be wrong constantly.
And Andy, that is the only overlap you have with John Lakeman.
Well, I don't know. We both have icy blue eyes. We're both very... we're certainly both worn down by life. He has more legitimate reasons than I do.
And then we have another great, what I love in this, it's just a great entrance, because we met this guy before briefly, and then while John is screwing the top on the urine, a nightstick just rolls out of the stall very ominously, and it's such a long moment of just a nightstick rolling across the floor of the bathroom.
Because he just audibly admitted that he's a government agent.
Right. And then Jack Birdbath comes out and says, basically, I was taking a shit. And John is in trouble because this guy knows everything now. And he's disgraced. So what's he going to do with that knowledge?
There's also the great detail that is consistent with a lot of different characters, which is Jack Birdbath is incredibly intimidating and ominous, and it seems like a threat when the nightstick rolls out. But at the same time, he's pulling up his pants as he's coming out. So it clearly was a mistake that he dropped the nightstick, but he's still intimidating. Again, also perfectly cast.
Perfectly cast.
Then we see Edward in his meeting with I forget who, but some secretary of something or other who's going to make him an attaché somewhere, and all he cares about is getting a badge. He wants an attaché badge, and the guy's like, I don't think that's a thing. Well, can I make one? So that...
And the guy's like, you can. It'll be weird if you do that. But I guess.
And then we go through him taking this bag full of money on his flight, and he is supposed to be able to bring it on a private jet, and then he's about to take it on a commercial jet, and he has to check the bag, and that becomes an issue when somebody on the other side in Brazil finds the money and steals it. And even there, that character is so tiny, but before we see him steal the money, we learn that everybody makes fun of him because he's just a loser, I
don't know. I'm curious what you guys' take is on this, but just going back to the original point of that a lot of the white guy patriarchy stuff, even though it's heavily white guy Wade, is satire and commentary, is that character who's Brazilian is a small character, but is dignified. He has a story. He has brothers. He's being harassed by these people that he works with. It's just it's a brief but full character.
He has his own little arc, yeah.
Right.
When he's driving away on the scooter.
And he's excited. Yes,
it's so funny.
It's so great. And the other thing I wanted to say about that moment is because you would think that the classic, even if you were doing a reversal on the spy thing, it would be he's actually an idiot. He's a bumbling, Clouseau. But even in that moment, John saw this situation coming. When the bag doesn't come out, he knows something's up. He immediately goes back to the security, knows what to do. He sees the other guy with the bag, doesn't hesitate, runs after him, and peels off. Doesn't even keep... Right, he peels off and bashes the other security guy in the head so he can immediately check the guy's information. It's instantaneous. He's a professional, and like all professionals, he sometimes screws up badly or it is screwed up for him. So it really grounds it in reality, even as he's being a badass.
Yeah, and it's a great demonstration of this guy knows every situation, he knows what to do, and he's allowed to do whatever he needs to do.
And he's weighing the consequences constantly, doing the math of, okay, yep, it's totally worth it to bang this guy over the head, to keep going.
These are also a lot of things that also would apply to me.
No.
Yes, you are the John Lakeman of the podcast.
No.
We're ruining Patriot for Alison. I can't watch this. I keep thinking about Secunda now.
So then we get all the information about where the bag is. They figure out who Edgar is when he's on the phone with somebody in the States who's giving him that information, who, like you said, is trying to convince him, be careful. He has 5 brothers and they all know Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So just, and that's when Dennis comes in and tries to convince him that he could use his help, which is just a spectacular scene. Yeah.
Disrobes to show how cut he is.
I'm ripped, man.
So funny. And then turns around. It's great. It's just a perfect
It's an interesting thing. I'm sure there are a lot of other examples in other shows and movies we could point to, but just it's an interesting thing because when I saw that scene originally, that was the moment where I was like, oh, he's friends with this guy or he knows this guy. There's no reason you would take this much time with this character unless the creator was doing this person a favor. And I think it's partly true. He clearly wants to give the ball to his brother because he's his brother, but he also wants to give the ball to his brother because he knows exactly what his brother can do.
Yep.
His brother is going to nail it. His brother's going to be an incredible asset to him in the show. So usually when that kind of move is made, either from nepotism or whatever it is, it's sort of just well, that person kind of stands out and they really shouldn't be the guy. In this case, that should be the guy.
Yeah, and it's also a really important character in terms of how everything starts to unravel after this thing happens next, because, it's all set up as a mystery, and Dennis is key to how things start to fall apart, which is what happens in the next scene when Dennis is following him out on the street and says, I can help you. And he says, if you don't get the fuck away from me, I'll stab you in the leg. And he does.
And the three things about that are, one, it shows how instantly ruthless John can be. It's not, again, as an example of the violence, it's not like, it's kind of funny. It's just like, it feels like, oh, Jesus, he fucking
Yeah,
stabbed
he's like,
him
I like you,
hard
Dennis. I don't want to stab you.
I can't believe
And
it.
he's just-
Yeah.
and
But I give you one more chance, and he does it again, and he stabs him. Just
and it's
right there.
immediate. It's not like so that's funny, and it's also hilarious that Dennis is like, but then the other thing is Lakeman's already ahead of it. That's just like, don't go to the hospital, because he knows what's going to happen if he goes to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So he's already ahead of the game. And then Dennis is like, don't go to the hospital. You're a jerk.
You're a jerk. Yeah. And I also have to point out that this is where we see Gil Bellows again saying that he wants to hire Japanese girls to accompany him to dinner, or maybe to whip the back of his legs with Twizzlers.
And that'll come back later.
Yeah, it's just so funny
great.
that such a specific thing.
And it's very much in the background. Like, that line is almost lost.
Yeah, it's just color.
Yeah, it's just color. But then it all ties together.
But then it's not color. It
Yeah.
like plays
Yeah.
in heavily, as does everything. Which is a thing I will say. Conrad also says, which is I have a way that I think about, particularly television series, although it can apply to movies too, of that some people have a creative morality and some people don't, which I sort of see as like, it's like you're making this pact with the audience, particularly if it's structured in kind of a suspense-filled, mysterious way, that you're either going to pay things off or you're not going to pay things off. Conrad says they don't move forward until they know where they are going and where all these arcs are going to end, which to me is so unusual and wonderful.
Yeah, and that is so apparent that this series was written, that he had written the whole series when they shot the pilot, because there's things that are set up that are this can't unfold like a normal television show where it's like, and then the story continues and the story continues. Like, every little thing is being set up so early on in such an amazing way.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but it's sort of like a good Harold. All right, so the next thing we see is...
Alison, where's the eject button? I can't find the eject button.
The next thing we see is the Brazilian guy's apartment, which, again, is shot in such a cool way, where he's kind of outside, and then the camera just stays there as he clearly goes around the building and breaks in, and we're just watching this guy watch TV, and then all of a sudden Lakeman comes in and tells him in very halting Portuguese, like, that bag belongs to me, I'm taking it, don't move. And then there's that great moment. I mean, to your point before, Alison, about how it's a little...
I think he's
pushed
speaking
sometimes.
French. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
It's a little. Look, I don't speak
Again,
anything,
who's the nerd
so,
now?
Yeah. But the brothers all coming out of the room, all wearing the exact same underwear, none of them with anything else on, all of them giant and looking like they know their way around an octagon. It's both like a little surreal, but also just so great. You know,
It's another absurdist thing, I think. It's just these guys that you don't know any of them are there, and then like 5 doors
and
just
the
open.
music too makes the whole scene. You know,
Yeah.
Absurdist, funny, but it also has been set up. Like, it's not out of nowhere.
Agreed.
Like,
Right.
we saw it coming. And the other thing that adds to the ominousness of it, even though it's like hilarious, is they're all slowly descending on him.
Yep.
They're all
Confident,
they're
slow
very
confidence.
confident they're going to beat him.
and they start doing all kinds of
Holds
arm
and-
locks and and he's clearly struggling.
And it's kind of like, how's he going to get out of this? Which is, again, great writing if you can paint your character into a corner. And they set up the knife, and he stabs just the right, person at the right moment, and of course kills them. So that's another thing that's just like one more tally on John's record, emotional record. But he escapes.
And what we don't know yet, but we learn very soon, is that there are next to no crime in Luxembourg.
I wonder, is
And
that
certainly
true?
not
I didn't
any-
look that up.
And certainly not any murders.
They do list it on screen at one point, like
Yes.
2011, 0 murders, 2012, 0 murders, 2013, 3 murders. So he's really having an effect on Luxembourg while he's there. Yeah.
Shone some spotlights on himself.
Right. So then we go back. We're at dinner where John is supposed to be. Leslie is furious that John's not there, doesn't know where he is. John is hiding in an alley somewhere and first calls his contacts at the CIA, who send somebody to help him, and then calls his wife, as you said, to see if she has been setting the alarm. And it's just a very sweet moment between them after he has just murdered someone and is being hunted by the police driving by. Edward shows up and uses his attaché badge to get the police to do what he wants them to do.
Although even in that scene, go fuck him up. Even in that scene, he clearly doesn't need to. They don't like his story. They're like, oh, okay, great, and then he's like, here's my badge. It's like he's just adding it in because he wants to use the badge.
Right. Just a very, very funny character. And then John shows up at dinner, and Dennis is at a different table and makes sure John knows that he has, because Edward says there's a clean shirt in the bag that he gives him, so he knows he can change before he goes to dinner. But then he still has blood on his neck from when he murdered someone moments ago, and Dennis helps him realize that and not get caught by Leslie.
Yeah, sort of showing that Dennis is still sort of semi on board.
He's on board, yeah. Even though he got stabbed in the thigh, he still wants to be cool with this guy. Then he's at I guess, well, he says, I don't know if this is an open mic. I don't know what the sign said outside, but he's performing another song. Again, just spilling his guts about what just happened to him. And Edward comes up and says, we got to get out of here, basically. And my favorite thing about that sequence is there's like an extra sitting in the front of the entire thing while he's playing a song. And when he goes, I'm taking off or whatever, she just gives this huge, like very. She's
like, I was enjoying this music.
Yes. It was so good. Like,
do you think that was planned, or do you think the extra just went rogue?
it just seemed so over the top. It seemed like one of those things where maybe nobody realized until later that was the best take they had, and she was incredibly distracting, but they had to use it, you know?
Also, such comedy in that scene where John's singing the song, clearly giving away like very top secret details about this mission, and his brother jumps up and can't get to the stage because there's like a waiter, and then there's another table here, and he just takes him forever to get to the stage.
He's getting
it's
cut
so
off.
funny. Yeah. It's like, oh, sorry, okay, you just go by with that. But he doesn't want to cause too much of a scene, but he is causing a scene. It's great.
This is also another moment where Edward and John, there's this crazy shit going on, and Edward kind of takes a moment to say, I'm always going to be there for you. You know, there's like this very sweet thing to their relationship that even when you murder somebody and you can't get out of it, I will help you get out of that situation. And then we meet Agatha, the Luxembourgian detective.
Agathe.
Homicide detective.
Agathe, yeah. She's speaking French, right?
Who knows?
And
this opens up a whole other thing that we'll learn more about later, but the fact that again, I don't want to spoil it, but we learn that the women detectives are in charge of the homicides because there are never any
happens.
homicides.
Yeah.
I was shocked that this was established this early. I had no memory that it was in the pilot.
I forgot too. I was like, wow, they really go through everything.
Which really just shows the level of forethought that this whole series had. And again, one of the actors, I don't know, maybe Alison could do better with this name, Aliet Ofaim.
Yeah, that was wrong. I don't know how you say it, but I know that was wrong.
I'm friends with her. She's on a Harold team with me. She's so, again, perfect casting, just because she immediately holds your attention and holds a certain authority, but she has so little to do in this show. They show her with her daughter. Like, they establish so much in this 1 hour of television.
Yeah, she's very beautiful, but she also just has a gravity to her of like, oh yeah, this is a detective who's going to be a problem. You know?
Yes, right.
So then we see her at the crime. I think she was at the crime scene, and she says, make a note of anybody who subscribes to the newspaper tonight.
And then
because she's good at her job.
So good at her job. And that's exactly the mistake that Dennis makes in the next scene, as well as going to the hospital. So it all leads back to him. They're already asking him questions.
But also that John knows that was a huge mistake for Dennis to subscribe to the newspaper. Like, John immediately goes,
So he knows too. And then you don't know.
After him. Yeah.
You don't know. It's like, is John just going to kill him? Is that just what's going to happen? Like, that is a possibility with this character, even after the time we've taken to make Dennis sort of sympathetic and funny.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And this is when everything starts collapsing on itself. And, he gets the threatening note from the Barrows brothers, which to me, I did not notice it the first time around. It's a threat from the Barrows brothers that give us the bag back or we're going to kill you. And it has a sketch of themselves on it. Somebody took the time for either for fun or for like, oh, maybe he won't know who we are. Right? Do a little sketch.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Well, and then at this point is where he gives the money he's supposed to be delivering. He talks to the guy on the phone. The guy tells him where to meet him. He gives them the money. And then, of course, he finds out he gave the money to the wrong guy. So this has now gone completely sideways, and everything is all fucked up.
And this kind of builds to this one shot when they go back to when Kurtwood Smith is already irritated with it because he was late for the important meeting. Again, a scene where Kurtwood Smith, to me, is giving him too much slack. But I kind of feel as you get to know that character more and more and know what he's been through and stuff like that, it just sort of makes sense. And he still maintains that Kurtwood Smith intimidation. But it builds to this scene when they're sort of back home, and it's this long shot that's this one shot where all of the threads in a single one shot are sort of tied together and heightened for series.
Yeah.
And it's like, in that way, this is like, this show is so artistic and it does so many things to break the form. But one of the things they always ask an audience that they're testing a show with at the end is like, well, where do you think it's going to go or whatever, just kind of see that you're invested. Everything leads to another problem. Like Birdbath leaves him a threatening note in the one shot. Kurtwood Smith is saying, you may not be going on any other trips because you screwed up on this one, which will, of course, undermine the whole purpose of him being there. Stephen Tuchu shows up again, has a job there to cover for his mistakes, and in kind of a heartbreaking performance because now he's like injured his brain and can't even speak right, but may remember everything in the future. So that's another thing that's hanging. And Dennis says that he went to the hospital and now the police are talking to him. That's all in one shot. And then it lands on Kurtwood Smith saying, also, you keep parking in my fucking parking spot.
Which, again, he has to hold as important as the nuclear threat. Because if he drops either ball, the whole mission is fucked.
It's so
incredible.
Wonderful.
I also just want to mention a scene that we kind of skipped over because it's such a great scene, even though it doesn't have anything to do with, I mean, it's very important going forward, but for now it's not that important. But it's Edward explaining his relationship with his son to his son about
Cool
how
Rick.
he loved. There was a congressman who loved to dance, and let's call him Cool Rick.
Cool Rick is such a great name.
Yeah, and you know,
Wonderful.
and is important going forward.
Yep.
But yeah, so he explains
But
that he
also,
got into
to a certain degree, buys back. We were already like, all right, fuck this character. And the rest of the time, he's obsessed with the badge. He just seems like a total. And in this moment, not that it buys back his screw up with the kid fully with the audience, but at least we're like, in his own dumb, completely shut off way, he is trying and cares about this kid and cares about his mother.
Right. And whatever happened, he finally, for the first time, is telling this kid that he's his father and that he loves him, you know?
Yeah. Right. And Cool Rick loves you so much.
Yes. So that's it. Then we're hooked for episode 2.
That's right.
Man, I hope this gets at least just one other person to watch this show. It's such a good show.
I hope so too. It's really just such a feat of television, and it does make it even more perfect that it's just like this quiet, undiscovered thing, other than by cult, people who are looking for a cult favorite. It was so satisfying. So thank you, Alison. You're my number one recommender now.
I don't want that responsibility.
Well, that's too bad. That's very hard.
Have you heard about Love is Blind?
So, Alison, you've had such a
far-reaching career.
You're such a journeyman, both as an actor and a writer. Do you have any experiences on pilots that you would like to speak to?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I think I'm in a very lucky and unlucky position in that I think I am probably one of, if not, I'm either one of the highest, if not the highest amount of pilots that I have, network pilots that I have tested for and never booked one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing that at least 2 or 3 dozen I have tested for a network pilot. And testing means it's between you and like 2 other people. You're really at the end there, and you sign the contract and you do your performance in front of the execs. And I just could test and test and test, and I never booked a network pilot. And it was devastating. Every time it happens is devastating, because you sign this contract that's basically like, your life will change if you get this job. You sign the paper, and then you have your final audition. And I was so lucky that I got to get to the point where I got to test. But to test so many times and never even get one was just devastating for me, which is kind of why I stopped acting so much.
Yeah,
it's a hard business. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see them. They show you the money you're going to make, so it's just like, oh man. So they show that to you. They make you sign the deal.
The amount of nerves, and like, you can't do anything else that day. You have to like, just do your hair and run your lines. You can't like, and they don't pay you for that day, and you can't do anything else or make any other money. But it is just the hardest thing in the world. And often you're going against your friends too, just to add more just trauma into it.
You're going against your friends.
You and I tested for the same part at one point.
And you always got it.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
I ruined your career.
You did many times.
You're going against your friends. You're going against sort of different variations of you that offer something slightly different.
Yep.
And it's several different levels of it can be sort of, production company, studio, network, several times at network, different pairings to see chemistry. Mm-hmm. And it's every one of them. And I've only done it a couple of times as an actor, and mostly as, on the other side. And my heart goes out to everyone going through that process. And I remember John Hamm talking about this, not to me personally. I just heard him saying it on on YouTube, maybe.
Andy, here's what I think about testing for pilots.
But just being in the same.
Pass me another glass of wine, Andy, and I'll tell you what I think about pilots.
You got it, Johnny. That he would do the same thing you're saying, and that prior to Mad Men, it would just be like every year, just like test, not getting the part, test, not getting the part.
And that's John Hamm.
And that's John Hamm. He's much more handsome than you are.
Yeah.
With Mad Men, it was the same thing. It was like an endless series of testing, and then he got to the last level, and it changed his career. But it's like just as easily could not. It's just so difficult. But luckily,
and how do you not go into that process once you've done it a bunch of times? John Hamm is auditioning for Mad Men, and he's tested for so many things and not gotten them. How do you go into the process? And I know you have to, but how do you not go into the process going like, well, this isn't going to happen. What is the point of all this?
Yeah, you do. But then you're also, when you sign that contract, you're like, oh, there's a chance. Also, because I had done it so many times, everyone from like industry people to family to friends, everyone was like, I've never seen someone test this many times and not get one. Like, you're definitely going to get one at some point. It would be like statistically impossible for you not to get one. And I just couldn't get one. I just kept testing.
The most upsetting, well, I don't know if it's the most upsetting or it's the nice takeaway, is if you get to that level and you're testing that much, that means you're great. That means you do have a look that kind of they want. It's like you have all, they're like, you could get
it. Yeah, you could get it, but it's just like,
and then again, it's chance or it's like what the...
Yeah, and don't get the money, don't get the experience. It was just,
like, and
thanks for reminding me of that, guys.
Anyway, if you want to see her tests, Alison has a YouTube channel where she puts all of her tests up.
It's called Career Trauma.
Well, luckily for you, Alison, you're multi-talented, and now you're killing it as a writer.
Thanks, Andy. I'm trying.
And you are still out there as an actor.
Yeah, I still do act. Listen, if someone wants to put me in a pilot, I won't say no.
And you make your money as a commercial actor. So
also do that.
So this was really more of a just a thorough love fest than any episode thus far in terms of the product. Just because
we've had a couple like that, but this one might have been the most over the top of how much we loved this.
Just three people that couldn't say enough wonderful things about the show, and well deserved.
And I agree with Alison. If we can just get one person to watch the show, I will feel like mission accomplished.
Same. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alison Becker, for joining us.
Thank you, friends.
Good friend, talented actor, talented writer, queen of Los Angeles.
Wow, thanks. I'll take it. Can't book a pilot.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to check us out, we are copilotstv.com. All of our information is there. Is it .com?
It's .com, yes. We tried to get .tv and .net and .erg, but we couldn't get any of those, so we ended up with .com.
If you want to hear more, please check out our Patreon, patreon.com/copilotstv. All of our other information is there too. Please send us, emails, comments, give us 5 stars, and you will get your pilot's wings.
My wings have still not come. I gave us 5 stars.
No, yeah, I told you, Sean. They're not. It's a fake thing. You just get imaginary pilot's wings.